Hello everyone! I hope you're ready for another adventure, because today Wayne continues to read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Always remember that as we go through these amazing stories and read these outstanding adventures, all you have to do is press the CC button in your YouTube link in order to follow along with the words. Now I think North Star will be perfect to join us for today's adventure. Now the North Star is here. Let's jump in. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Chapter 2. Aunt Marge's Big Mistake. Harry went downstairs for breakfast the next morning to find the three Dursleys already sitting around the kitchen table. They were watching a brand new television, a welcome home for the summer present for Dudley, who had been complaining loudly about the long walk between the fridge and the television in the living room. Dudley had spent most of the summer in the kitchen, his piggy little eyes fixed on the screen, and his 5 chins wobbling as he ate continuously. Harry sat down between Dudley and Uncle Vernon, a large, beefy man with very little neck and a lot of moustache. Far from wishing Harry happy birthday, none of the Dursleys made any sign that they even noticed Harry enter the room. But Harry was far too used to this to care. He helped himself to a piece of toast and then looked up at the reporter on the television, who was halfway through a report on an escaped convict. The public is warned that Black is armed and extremely dangerous. A special hotline has been set up, and any signing of Black should be reported immediately. No need to tell us he's no good, snorted Uncle Vernon, staring over the top of his newspaper. Look at the state of him, the filthy layabout. Look at his hair! He shot a nasty look sideways at Harry, whose untidy hair had always been a source of great annoyance to Uncle Vernon. Compared to the man on the television, however, whose gaunt face was surrounded by matted, elbow-length tangle, Harry felt very well groomed indeed. The reporter had reappeared. The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries will announce today. Hang on, barked Uncle Vernon, staring fiercely at the reporter. You didn't tell us where the maniacs escaped from. What use is that? Lunatic could be coming down the street right now. Aunt Petunia, who was bony and horse-faced, whipped about and peered intently out the kitchen window. Harry knew Aunt Petunia would simply love to be the one to call the hotline number. She was the nosiest woman in the world and spent most of her life sparing on the boring, law-abiding neighbors. When will they learn, said Uncle Vernon, pounding the table with his large purple fist, that hanging's the only way to deal with these people. Very true, said Aunt Petunia, who was still squinting in the next door's runner beans. Uncle Vernon dropped his teacup, glanced at his watch, and added, I'd better be off in a minute, Petunia. Marge's train gets in at 10. Harry, whose thoughts had been upstairs with the broomstick servicing kit, was brought back to earth with an unpleasant bump. Aunt Marge, he blurted out. She's not coming here, is she? Aunt Marge was Uncle Vernon's sister. Even though she was not a blood relative of Harry, whose mother had been Aunt Petunia's sister, he had been forced to call her Aunt Marge all his life. Aunt Marge lived in the country in a house with a large garden where she bred bulldogs. She didn't even often stay at Prividives because she couldn't bear to leave her precious dogs. But each of her visits stood out horribly vivid in Harry's mind. At Dudley's 5th birthday party, had whacked Harry around the shins with her walking stick to stop him from beating Dudley at musical statues. A few years later, she had turned up at Christmas with a computerized robot for Dudley and a box of dog biscuits for Harry. On her last visit, the year before Harry started at Hogwarts, Harry had accidentally trotted on the tail of her favorite dog. Ripper had chased Harry out in the garden and up a tree, and Aunt Marge refused to call him off until past midnight. The memory of this incident still brought tears of laughter to Dudley's eyes. Marge will be here for a week, Uncle Vernon snorted. And while we're on the subject, he pointed a fat finger threatening at Harry. We need a few things straight before I go and collect her. Dudley smirked and withdrew his gaze from the television. Watching Harry being bullied by Uncle Vernon was Dudley's favorite form of entertainment. Firstly, growled Uncle Vernon, you'll keep a civil tongue in your head when talking to Marge. All right, said Harry bitterly, if she does when she's talking to me. Secondly, said Uncle Vernon, acting as though he had not heard Harry's reply, as Marge doesn't know anything about your abnormality. I don't want any funny stuff while she's here. You will behave yourself, got me? If she does, said Harry, gritting his teeth. And thirdly, said Uncle Vernon, while his little eyes were slits in his purple face, we've told Aunt Marge you attend St. Brutus's Secure Center for Incurable Criminal Boys. What? Yelled Harry. You'll be sticking to that story, boy, or there'll be trouble, spat Vernon. Harry sat there, white-faced and furious, staring at Uncle Vernon loudly, hardly able to believe it. Aunt Marge coming for a week visit. It was the worst birthday present the Dursleys had ever gotten. Well, Petunia, said Uncle Vernon, gritting to his feet. I'll be off to the station then. Want to come along for the ride, daughters? No, said Dudley, whose attention had turned to the television, now that Uncle Vernon had finished threatening Harry. Dudley's got to make himself smart for his auntie, said Aunt Petunia, smoothing Dudley's thick blonde hair. Mummy's bought him a lovely new bow tie. Uncle Vernon clapped Dudley on his porky shoulder. See you in a bit, then, he said, and he left the kitchen. Harry, who had been sitting in a kind of horrid trance, had a sudden idea. Abandoning his toast, he got to his feet and followed Uncle Vernon to the front door, Uncle Vernon pulling on his coat. I'm not taking you, he snarled, as he turned his eyes to see Harry watching him. Like I wanted to come, said Harry coldly. I want to ask you something. Uncle Vernon eyed us suspiciously. 3rd years at my school are allowed to visit a village sometimes, Harry said. So, snapped Uncle Vernon, taking his car keys from a hook next to the door. I need you to sign a permission slip for him, said Harry in a rush. Why would I do that, sneered Uncle Vernon. Well, said Harry, choosing his words carefully, it'll be hard work pretending to Aunt Marge I got into St. What's-its? St. Brutus's Secure Center for Incurable Criminal Boys, bellowed Uncle Vernon. And Harry was pleased to hear a definite tone of panic in Uncle Vernon's voice. Exactly, said Harry, looking calmly up at Uncle Vernon's purple face. It's a lot to remember. I'll have to make it sound convincing, won't I? What if I accidentally let it slip? You'll get the stuffing knocked out of you, won't you? Roared Uncle Vernon, advancing on Harry with his fist raised. But Harry stood his ground. Knocking the stuffing out of me won't make Aunt Vernon forget what I could tell her, he said grimly. Uncle Vernon stopped, his fist still raised, his face angry as a pulse. If you sign my permission slip, Harry went on quickly, I swear I'll remember when I'm supposed to go to school, and I'll act like I'm normal and everything. Harry could tell Uncle Vernon was thinking it over, even if his teeth was bare and a vein throbbing in his temple. Right, he snapped finally. I shall monitor your behavior during Marge's visit. If at the end, if you've toed the line and kept your side of the story, I'll sign your ready form. He wheeled around, pulled open the front door, and slammed it, so hard that one of the panes of glass on the top fell out. Harry didn't return to the kitchen. He went back upstairs to his bedroom. If he was going to act like a real muggle, he'd better start now. Slowly and sadly, he gathered up all of his presents and birthday cards and hid them under the loose floorboard with his homework. Then he went to Hedwig's cage. Errol seemed to have recovered. He and Hedwig were both asleep, heads under their wings. Harry sighed and poked them both awake. Hedwig, he said gloomily, you're going to have to clear off for a week. Go with Errol. Ron will look after you. I'll send a note with him explaining. And don't look at me like that. Hedwig's large amber eyes were reproachful. It's not my fault. It's the only way I'll be allowed to visit Hogsmeade with Ron and Hermione. 10 minutes later, Errol and Hedwig, who had a note on Ron's leg, soared out of the window and out of sight. Harry, now feeling thoroughly miserable, put the empty cage away inside his wardrobe. But Harry didn't have long to brood. In next to no time, Aunt Petunia was shrinking up the stairs for Harry to come down and get ready to welcome their guest. Do something about your hair, Aunt Petunia snapped as she reached the hall. Harry couldn't see the point of trying to make his hair lie flat. Aunt Marge loved criticizing it, so the untighter it looked, the happier she would be. All too soon, there was a crunch of gravel outside as Uncle Vernon's cart pulled it back into the driveway, then a clunk of the car doors and the footsteps up the garden path. Get the door, Aunt Petunia hissed at Harry. A feeling of great gloom in his stomach, Harry pulled open the door. On the threshold stood Aunt Marge. She was very much like Uncle Vernon, large, beefy, and purple-faced. She even had a mustache, though not as bushy as his. In one hand, she held an enormous suitcase, and tucked under the other was an old, evil-tempered bulldog. Where's my dudders? Roared Aunt Marge. Where's my neefy-boo? Dudley came waddling down the hall, his blonde hair plastered to his fat face, a bow tie just visible under his many chins. Marge thrust the suitcase into Harry's stomach, knocking the wind out of him, seized Dudley in a tight one-armed hug, and planted a kiss on his cheek. Harry knew perfectly well that Dudley only put up with Aunt Marge's hugs because he was paid well for it, and sure enough, when they broke apart, Dudley had a crisp 20-pound note clutched in his fat fist. Petunia! Shouted Aunt Marge, striding past Harry as though he was a hat stand. Aunt Marge and Aunt Petunia kissed, or rather, Aunt Marge bumped her large jaw against Aunt Petunia's bony cheekbone. Uncle Vernon now came in, smiling jovially as he shut the door. Tea, Marge, he said. And what will Ripper take? Ripper will take some tea out of my saucer, said Marge, as they proceeded into the kitchen, leaving Harry alone with the suitcase. But Harry wasn't complaining. Any excuse not to be with Aunt Marge would be fine. So he began to heave the case up the stairs to the spare bedroom, taking as long as he could. By the time he got back to the kitchen, Marge had been supplied with tea and fruitcake, and Ripper was lapping noisily in the corner. Harry saw Aunt Petunia wince slightly as specks of tea and drool fleckled on her clean floor. Aunt Petunia hated animals. Who's looking after the other dogs, Marge? Uncle Vernon asked. Oh, I've got Colonel Fubster managing them, boomed Aunt Marge. He's retired now. Good for him to have something to do, but I couldn't leave poor old Ripper. He pines if I'm away. Ripper began to growl as soon as Harry sat down. This directed Aunt Marge's attention to Harry for the first time. So, she barked. Still here, are you? Yes, said Harry. Don't you just say yes in that ungrateful tone, Aunt Marge growled. It's damn good of Vernon and Petunia to keep you. Wouldn't have done it myself. You'd gone straight to the orphanage if you'd been dumped on my doorstep. Harry was bursting to say that he'd rather live in an orphanage with the Dursleys, but the thought of the Hogsmeade form stopped him. He forced his face into a painful smile. Don't you smirk at me, boomed Aunt Marge. I can see you haven't improved since I last saw you. I hoped school would knock some manners into you. She took a large gulp of tea with her mustache and said, Where is it you send them again, Aunt Vernon? St. Brutus's, said Uncle Vernon proudly. It's a first-rate institution for hopeless cases. I see, said Aunt Marge. Do they use the cane at St. Brutus's, boy? She barked across the table. Uncle Vernon nodded curtly behind Aunt Marge's back. Yes, said Harry. Then, feeling he might as well do the thing properly, he added, all the time. Excellent, said Aunt Marge. I won't have this namby-pamby, wishy-washy nonsense about not hitting people who deserve it. A good thrashing is what's needed in 99 cases out of 100. Have they beaten you often? Oh yes, said Harry, loads of times. Aunt Marge narrowed her eyes. I still don't like your tone, boy, she said. If you speak of your beatings in that casual way, they weren't hitting you hard enough. Petunia, I'd write if I were you. Make it clear that you approve of the use of extreme case in this boy's case. Perhaps Uncle Vernon was worried that Harry might forget their bargain. In any case, he changed the subject abruptly. Heard the news this morning, Marge? What about the escaped prisoner, eh? As Marge started to make herself at home, Harry caught himself thinking almost longfully of life at number 4 without her. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia usually encouraged Harry to stay out of their way, which Harry was only happy to do. Aunt Marge, on the other hand, wanted Harry under all eyes at all times, so that she could boom out suggestions for his improvement. She delighted in comparing Harry to Dudley, and took huge pleasure in buying Dudley expensive presents while glaring at Harry, as though daring him to ask why he hadn't gotten a present too. She also kept throwing out dark hints about what made Harry such an unsatisfactory person. You mustn't blame yourself for the way the boys turned out, Vernon, she said over lunch on the third day. If there's something rotten on the inside, there's nothing anyone can do about it. Harry tried to concentrate on his food, but his hand shook his face where it started to burn with anger. Remember the form, he told himself. Remember Hogsmeade. Don't say anything, don't rise. Aunt Marge reached for the glass. It's one of the basic rules of breeding, she said. You see it all the time with dogs. If there's something wrong with the bitch, then there'll be something wrong with the pup. At that moment, the wine glass Aunt Marge was holding exploded in her arms. Shards of glass went flying in every direction. Aunt Marge sputtered and blinked, and her ruddy face was dripping. Marge, squealed Aunt Petunia. Marge, are you all right? Not to worry, grunted Aunt Marge, mopping her face with her napkin. Must have squeezed too hard. Did the same thing with Colonel Fubster the other day. Don't eat the fuss, Petunia. I have a very firm grip. But Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon were both looking at Harry suspiciously, so he decided to skip breakfast and skip the table as soon as he could. Outside in the hall, he leaned against the wall, breathing deeply. It had been a long time since he'd lost control and made something explode. He couldn't afford to let it happen again. Hogsmeade form wasn't the only thing at stake. If he carried on like that, he'd get in trouble with the Ministry of Magic. Harry was still an underage wizard, and he was forbidden by wizard law to do magic outside of school. His record wasn't exactly clean either. Only last summer, he'd gotten an official that had stated quite clearly that if the Ministry got wind of any more magic at Privet Drive, Harry would face expulsion at Hogwarts. He heard the Dursleys leaving the table and hurried upstairs out of the way. Harry got through the next 3 days by forcing himself to think about the handbook of do-it-yourself broom care whenever Aunt Marge started on him. This worked quite well, though it seemed to give him a glazed look, because Aunt Marge started voicing the opinion that he was mentally subnormal. At long last, the final evening of Marge Day arrived. Aunt Petunia cooked a fancy dinner and Uncle Vernon uncorked several bottles of wine. They all got through the soup and the salmon without a single mention of Harry's faults. During the lemon meringue pie, Uncle Vernon bored them with a long talk about Grunnings, his drill-making company. Then Aunt Petunia made coffee and Uncle Vernon brought out a bottle of brandy. Can I tempt you, Marge? Marge had already had quite a lot of wine. Her huge face was red. Just a small one, then she chuckled. A bit more than that. And a bit more. That's the ticket. Dudley was eating his 4th piece of pie. Aunt Petunia was sipping coffee with her little finger sticking out. Harry really wanted to disappear to his bedroom, but he met Uncle Vernon's angry eyes and knew he would have to sit it out. "Ah," said Aunt Marge, smacking her lips and putting the empty glass back down. "Excellent nosh, Petunia. It's normally just a fry-up for me of an evening." With 12 dogs to look after, she burped richly and patted her great tweeded stomach. "Pardon me, but I do like to see a healthy-sized boy," she went on, winking at Dudley. "You'll be a proper-sized man, Dudders, like your father. Yes, I'll have a spot of brandy, Vernon. Now this one here." She jerked her head at Harry, who felt his stomach clench. The handbook, he thought quickly. "This one's got a mean, runty look about him. You get that with dogs. I had Colonel Filibuster drown one last year. Ratty little thing it was. Weak, unbred." Harry was trying to remember page 12 of his book. "A charm to cure reluctant reversers. It all comes down to blood. As I was saying the other day, bad blood will out. Now, I'm saying nothing against your family, Petunia." She patted Petunia's bony hand with her shoulder. "But your sister was a bag egg. They turned up in the best families. Then she ran off with that wastel, and here's the result of it right in front of us." Harry was starting to turn pale, a funny ringing in his ears. "Grasp your broom by the tail," he thought, but he couldn't remember what came next. Aunt Marge's voice seemed to be boring into him like one of Uncle Vernon's drills. "This Potter," said Aunt Marge loudly, seizing the brandy bottle and splashing more into her glass over the tablecloth. "You never told me what he did." Aunt Vernon and Uncle Petunia were looking extremely tense. Dudley had even looked up from his pie to gape at his parents. "He didn't work," said Uncle Vernon, with half glance at Harry. "Unemployed." "As I expected," said Aunt Marge, taking a swig of brandy and wiping the chin on her sleeve. "No account, good for nothing, lazy scrounger who—" "He was not," said Harry suddenly, and the table went quiet. Harry was shaking all over. He had never felt so angry in her life. "More brandy!" yelled Uncle Vernon, who had gone very white. He emptied the bottle into Aunt Marge's glass. "You boy," he snarled, "go to bed, go on." "No, Vernon," hiccuped Marge, holding up a hand, her tiny bloodshot eyes fixed on Harry. "Go on, boy. Proud of your parents, are you? They go and get themselves killed in a car clash? Drunk, I expect." "They didn't die in a car crash," he said, who found himself on his feet. "They died in a car crash, you nasty little liar, and left you to be a burden for their decent, hard-working relatives," screamed Aunt Marge, swelling with fury. "You are an insolent, ungrateful." But Marge suddenly stopped speaking. For a moment, it was like her words had failed her. She seemed to be swelling up with anger, but the swelling didn't stop. Her great red face started to expand. Her tiny eyes bulged, and her mouth stretched too tightly to speak. The next second, several buttons had started to burst on the tweed jacket and pinged off the walls. She was inflating like a monstrous balloon, her stomach bursting free of the tweed waistband, each of her fingers blowing up like salami. "Marge!" yelled Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia together as Aunt Marge's whole body began to rise from the chair towards the ceiling. She was entirely round now, like a vast life buoy with piggy eyes. Her hands had stuck out weirdly as she drifted up into the air, making a papa-like popping noises. Ripper came skidding into the room, barking madly. "No!" Uncle Vernon seized Marge's feet and tried to pull her down, but almost lifted off the floor. A second later, Ripper rapped forward and sank his teeth into Uncle Vernon's leg. Harry tore from the dining room before anyone could stop him, heading for the cupboard under the stairs. The cupboard door burst open magically as he reached it. In 10 seconds, he had heaved his trunk to the front door. He sprinted upstairs and threw himself under the bed, wrenching loose the floorboard cover, and grabbed the pillowcase full of his bookcases and birthday presents. He wriggled out, seized Hedgewood Cave, and dashed downstairs to his trunk, just as Uncle Vernon burst out of the dining room, his trousers bloody in tatters. "Come back in here," he bellowed. "Come back in here and put her right." But a reckless rag came over Harry. He kicked the trunk open, pulled out his wand, and pointed at his uncle. "She deserved it," said Harry, breathing very fast. "She deserved what she caught. You keep away from me." He fumbled before him the latch on the door. "I'm going," he said. "I've had enough." And the next moment he was out in the dark, quiet street, heaving the heavy trunk behind him, Hedwig's cage in his arm. Oh, wow. A lot really just happened with Harry as he was able to get away from the Dursleys. What did you think, North Star? I did enjoy that part too. We'll see you on the next adventure, okay? And we'll see you on the next adventure here with Wayne Reads. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye.